This is a CNN special report. America under attack. In New York, Aaron Brown and Paula Zahn.
Good evening again, everyone. We're now 37 hours or so since this atrocity was committed. 30-some blocks from where we are. You can hear the sirens still in the background. This rescue mission, which has proceeded very, very slowly, has gotten much more complicated tonight. It's gotten more complicated because another building is in danger of coming down. One Liberty Plaza, about a 60-story building. We were down in the area, and you could actually see pieces of the building, glass from the windows facing to the building coming off. They moved everybody out, and they cannot move people back in to start the search for survivors, and they still believe there may be some in there until they figure out a way to stabilize that building, and that's not an easy thing to do. In the hour ahead, we have, we'll update you on the situation at Ground Zero. We have a fair amount to tell you about that. We want at some point here to offer up a sense of the human dramas that have taken place. There are some horrible, truly horrible stories and some rich stories of heroism that we want to tell you about as well. But most importantly, and certainly at the beginning, there are a number of important and in some cases dramatic breaking news developments, and that's where we want to begin. Paula.
Yeah, at the top of the show, we're going to get into the news about federal agents actually taking into custody a number of men in Providence, Rhode Island, a couple of cities in South Florida, and in Boston. We're going to get to that a little bit later on, but I think, Aaron, you would agree, one of the greatest mysteries now of this whole tragedy is how it is that 4 planes were hijacked in a relatively short period of time. And right now, we're going to go to Kelly Arena, who is going to provide us with some of the first insights we actually have as to what exactly went on Flight 93. That was the flight headed from Dulles Airport to San Francisco. Kelly, what can you tell us tonight?
Paula, as CNN has reported throughout the day, a microphone was keyed open on the hijacked flight that crashed in Pennsylvania. Now, CNN has obtained a partial transcript of what was heard by air traffic control from the cockpit. That's United Airlines Flight 93. It actually departed Newark for San Francisco. It was flying at 35,000 feet over the Cleveland area. Now, at this point, air traffic controllers heard shouting in the cockpit with someone yelling, "Get out of here." The microphone is momentarily turned off. It comes back on, some scuffling is heard, and again a voice yells, "Get out of here." The microphone is again turned off. When it is turned on again, it's clear that the pilot is no longer in the cockpit. Someone is heard speaking in broken English in what was described as an Arabic accent, telling passengers, quote, "There's a bomb on board. This is the captain speaking. Remain in your seat. There is a bomb on board. Stay quiet. We are meeting with their demands. We are returning to the airport." Now, to supplement that transcript, we do have some information on what was going on outside the cockpit. Family members of one passenger who phoned his family on his cell phone said the passengers, after learning that the World Trade Center had been hit, had voted to attack the terrorists. Nothing else, unfortunately, was heard from the passengers after that. That flight did hold 38 passengers and a crew of 8. Paula, Aaron?
It is so chilling to hear these accounts, Kelly. We have now, too, heard these dramatic stories of passengers on several of these flights making contact with family members, telling family members they love them. Barbara Olson, who is a contributor here at CNN, actually telling her husband exactly what was going on, and at one point sort of indicating that she needed some advice on how she could interact with the captain of the plane to prevent this horrible tragedy that it all seems with certain she sort of had a whiff of was about to happen.
Kelly, before you get away, just give me a little bit of what's going on and how we're getting this stuff. Do you expect that you're going to get full transcripts? Do you expect you're going to see, for example, what went on in the other planes in the hours perhaps, or at least the day ahead?
Well, Aaron, this was the only plane that we are aware of that actually had its microphone turned on at any point. Of course, if the black boxes are ever recovered, we may get more information. That is going to be very difficult we're told by aviation experts at the sites concerning the World Trade Center and also here at the Pentagon. About the only black box that might be gettable at this point is the flight that did indeed crash in Pennsylvania, because they have access to that plane and to the wreckage more easily than they have access to the others. But this was not something that was officially given to us. We obtained this through sources. So for now, everything is mum as the investigation continues.
We won't ask any more about it. We don't want any sources to get burned here. Thank you for your work. That is quite remarkable stuff. Late this afternoon, we also were we better understood the president's movements yesterday. You recall, it took the president a long time, essentially all day, to get from Sarasota, Florida, where he started his day yesterday to make a speech on education, back to the White House. And I think a lot of us wondered why it took so long, what was going on. Our senior White House correspondent, John King, can join us now and provide the answers to that. John, good evening again.
Aaron, more information on the president's return to Washington tonight. Also a major development that gives us some indication of where this story might be headed in the days ahead. CNN has learned that over the past several hours, senior administration officials in negotiations with key members of Congress on what they are calling a resolution of resolve. Translation, a resolution authorizing the president to use force to retaliate for these terrorist attacks on the United States. Negotiations went on for several hours today, including the White House faxing proposed language to key members of Congress. We are told those negotiations will resume in the morning. All this as we saw the president today taking stock of some of the devastation caused by these catastrophic attacks and leading intensifying discussions debating just how the United States should respond.
A first-hand look at the devastation at the Pentagon and a patriotic moment even as the building continued to smolder.
Coming here makes me sad on the one hand. It also makes me angry. And our country will, however, not be cowed by terrorists, by people who don't share the same values we share. Thank you, sir.
This tour as the White House responded to questions about why it took so long for the president to return to Washington after the attacks. The administration said it had reliable information that the jet that barreled into the Pentagon was initially heading toward the White House. That triggered this evacuation. And sources tell CNN the vice president and other top officials were ushered from their offices to a fortified command and control center deep under the White House grounds. The administration said Air Force One also was a target, and that is why Mr. Bush stopped at 2 military bases on a 9-hour trip back to Washington from Florida, and had fighter jet escorts on the final leg home, even after the government was certain all commercial jetliners were accounted for and on the ground.
The information that we had was real and credible about Air Force One, and the manner in which Air Force One operated maintained the security of Air Force One at all times.
Mr. Bush met twice with his national security team, and sources tell CNN the discussions included an update on the fast-developing investigation and talk of possible U.S. military responses. Mr. Bush called the attacks acts of war, and in the words of one senior official familiar with the evidence, quote, everything points to the terrorist network of Osama bin Laden.
This enemy hides in shadows and has no regard for human life. This is an enemy who preys on innocent and unsuspecting people, then runs for cover.
Now, as the administration negotiates with Congress over that resolution authorizing force, also a major diplomatic push by the White House as it tries to build what it is calling a broad international coalition to fight terrorism. The president spoke personally today with the leaders of Great Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Russia, and China. The Secretary of State involved in these efforts as well. More calls from the president expected tomorrow, and the White House welcoming gladly a resolution from NATO equating these attacks on the United States to an attack on the NATO alliance. Again, the administration negotiating with Congress on two fronts now, Aaron. One, a resolution authorizing the use of force. Another, they're hoping to get a bill to the president's desk as early as tomorrow afternoon, authorizing $20 billion to pay for the early recovery and investigative efforts. Aaron?
John, here's my opportunity to be naive for the moment. What's this a negotiation over? I saw, as you did, all of the members of Congress standing shoulder to shoulder, as they said 3 or 4 times. What is the negotiation here?
Well, certainly the negotiation is over the specific language. We heard some guests earlier on Larry King Live when we first reported this saying they didn't foresee there being a problem. Some questions in Congress about giving the president a blank check. Remember, they have yet to announce any conclusions of the investigation, yet to say officially who they believe or which parties they believe are responsible for this. So in the Congress right now, they don't want this to become a Tonkin Gulf resolution. They don't want some open-ended resolution, but we are told progress being made in negotiations on a resolution that would say if the administration has credible evidence as to who is responding, then the Congress would support using force to retaliate.
And John, just quickly, in the normal course of events, in a normal day when the president travels, are there military escorts flying with the president?
There are often military escorts in the air. Very rare that we, the reporters traveling on Air Force One or with the president on another aircraft, would see them. They do go up as routine security at a distance just to be safe, especially on international trips. To see a fighter jet just off the wing of Air Force One, quite extraordinary. That a sign of the intense security triggered by this event, and there are other security precautions being taken as well. CNN, in fact, has been told the vice president not staying in his official residence here in Washington. He is staying in a more secure location for now.
And weren't we told yesterday that the Secret Service said or believed that Air Force One was not at risk?
Yes, we were told that. Secret Service saying throughout the day that they did not believe Air Force One was at risk. Now officials saying that they do believe that it may have been a potential target, but they note that that's why it did not come back to Washington. They would say now that it was not at risk because it did not return to airspace anywhere near Washington, anywhere near the northern half of the country for that matter, until they had accounted for all commercial airliners. At the time the president left Florida for Louisiana, when he left Florida originally, that plane that crashed outside of Pittsburgh was still in the air. U.S. officials now saying once they knew all the planes were down, all the other planes were accounted for, so they waited for some planes to land that the FAA had instructed to land. Only then, when the skies were clear, did the president return to Washington.
John, thank you. Our senior White House correspondent, John King, at the White House on his post tonight. John, thanks. Paul?
As you know, Aaron, because you've been on the air most of the day, as I have, we don't even know what day it is anymore. One of the challenges of covering this story is the information comes at us and in small pieces, and we're just beginning to be able to put some of this stuff together. The Attorney General John Ashcroft confirming that the suspected hijackers actually were, some of them, trained in the United States as pilots. He also confirmed that the planes, individual planes that were hijacked by as many as 3 to 6 individuals on each plane, some of them using knives and box cutters, and as Kelly Arena just reported, in the case of this flight going from Newark to San Francisco, bomb threats. Federal agents have taken some folks into custody in Boston, Providence, Rhode Island, Vero Beach, and Venice, Florida, and right now we're going to go to a report by Mike Betcher that helps us all better understand how broad this investigation is underway tonight.
From Maine to Florida, the investigation moved quickly along the eastern seaboard.
We have, in the last 24 hours, taken the manifests and used those as an evidentiary base, and have talked to many of the families of the victims, and have successfully, I believe, identified many of the hijackers on each of the 4 flights that went down.
Federal investigators now believe they know the identity of 4 men capable of piloting the 2 planes that left Boston and crashed into the World Trade Center. The key, rental cars parked by the suspected terrorist at Portland International Airport and Boston's Logan Airport, each yielding clues that ultimately led investigators to flight schools in Florida.
A number of the suspected hijackers were trained as pilots in the United States.
Rental records for the car left in Portland brought investigators to residences in Vero Beach, Florida, which were searched by the FBI. Inside one house, pictures of Adnan Bukhari and a pilot certificate from a Florida flight school in his name. Also found inside the residence, another pilot certificate for Amir Abbas Bukhari. Another certificate indicates that at least one of the Bukharis participated in a program to help train Saudi Airlines employees. Federal investigators believe the 2 men are brothers and prime suspects. FBI agents also visited other Florida locations after gathering clues from the second rental car parked at